Hey, bullfrogs and friends, how are y'all? All right, well, I'm in a different location today. As I said before, I have a house full of people, and I hope you enjoyed getting to read along with my mom. She sure enjoyed it. She really loved reading with y'all. Okay, well, so today we're going to read the last two chapters of our book, chapter 9 and chapter 10. Chapter 9 is called Heroes of the Dawn. All right, y'all ready? Here we go. Can't wait to see how this book ends. Woo-woo. Jack felt Cuckoo's little hand on his ear. He opened his eyes. The mosquito netting had been pulled back. The baby baboon was perched on the headboard of the bed. She grabbed Jack's ear and tugged. He started to push her away, but to his surprise, his right arm was pinned across his chest. It was tucked tightly into a cotton sling. No, no, Cuckoo, said Annie. She pushed the baby baboon away from Jack. Florence Nightingale was sitting on the edge of the bed, wrapping a long piece of cloth around Annie's ankle. Hello, Jack, said Florence with a lovely smile. I hope you don't mind your sling. I maneuvered your arm into it while you were in a deep sleep. Thanks, he said. I'm afraid you dislocated your shoulder, said Florence. It will be less painful if you wear the sling. As soon as you get to a city, you must see a doctor. I will, thanks, said Jack. Florence finished pinning the cloth bandage snugly around Annie's ankle. There, my lady. Your ankle will heal as well. But you must go very slowly for a while, she said. She looked at Jack. Your sister received a frightful sprain, but I'm happy to say she has no broken bones. She has broken no bones. Cool, said Jack. Florence tucked Jack's blanket tighter around him. There, soldier, warmer now? Jack was confused at first. Then he realized that Florence had thought he meant that he was cold when he said cool. He started to laugh, but it hurt his arm too much. Miss Nightingale, you really are a great nurse, said Annie. What's your secret? I have no secret, said Florence. I have only taken care of friends and relatives. As you heard from Lord Bickerson, my family does not allow me to work. But I would love to be a nurse. That is my greatest dream in life. It is why I found it so strange that you two thought I was a nurse. And now, through entirely unpredictable circumstances, I have been a nurse to you both. Is that not a remarkable coincidence? Florence shook her head with wonder. Well, please excuse me, and I will pour your tea. Florence stepped over to a small kerosene stove and poured water from a tea kettle into 2 cups. Good try, Jack whispered to Annie. She still doesn't have a clue that she's great. So how can she share her secret of greatness with us? I don't know, said Annie. This is tricky. Here you are, said Florence, returning with 2 cups of tea. She handed Annie 1 cup and then helped Jack take the other in his left hand. Jack carefully brought it to his lips. The hot tea and honey tasted wonderful. She allowed me to understand what you told me last night, said Florence. You both risked your lives to save Cuckoo. Jack and Annie nodded. Florence smiled and turned to the baby baboon. Little one, I believe your 2 friends are great heroes, she said. Not really, said Annie. We're not like you. You are the great hero. What? How silly. Surely no one would call me a hero, said Florence. But they will, said Annie. I know you're not a real nurse yet, but someday you're going to be the greatest nurse of all time. Florence looked at Jack. Did you actually see your sister fall from the cliff? She said under her breath. No, why? Jack whispered. I worry she might have hit her head, said Florence. She does not seem in her right mind. Jack laughed. Don't worry, she's fine, he said. What she says about you is true. We know it for a fact. Oh, dear. Perhaps you both fell on your heads, said Florence. I appreciate your gratitude, children, but an ankle bandage and a simple arm sling should not convince you I will be a great nurse. Well, what do you think makes a great nurse? Asked Annie. I have thought about that, actually, said Florence. I would have to say discipline, quickness, and kindness. Annie slipped her hand out from under the blanket. She and Jack glanced at the ring of truth. It wasn't glowing. "Good try," Jack whispered again. "It seems like you definitely have those qualities," Annie said to Florence. "So why won't your family let you be a nurse?" "They mean no harm," Florence said with a sigh. "They only want me to be a proper lady." Remember, back then they wouldn't let women work. Just any job that they wanted. "They will allow me to care for sick relatives and even some of the villagers, but they would never permit me to work in a hospital." "That's so unfair," said Annie. "The world needs you." "I don't believe the world needs me," Florence said, laughing. But then her expression grew more serious. "I do believe, though, that I need the world." "What do you mean?" asked Jack. "I just feel that I must do something good for the world, for the poor and the sick." Florence's voice became strong and passionate. "I must lift the load of pain from the suffering. I must do more than walk around the garden, write meaningless letters, sitting in drawing rooms, gossip about the neighbors, arrange flowers, and go to dances. I must. One's work must be for the greater good of all, not just for oneself. I feel I must do something useful for the world, or I will go stark, raving mad." Florence's eyes shone. Annie and Jack glanced down at the ring. It wasn't glowing brightly yet, but it was glimmering a little. Could you explain all that again in just a few simple words?" he said. "Let's see," said Florence. "How to say it simply." She stared out the window at the Nile. Then she spoke very clearly. "I truly believe, deep in my heart, that one's life must have meaning and purpose." Jack and Annie looked at the ring of truth. It glimmered more and more, then glowed as brightly as a burning ember. Do y'all remember how Annie had on this ring on her finger? And they said it will glow when a great truth is shared. And so that's what they've been trying to do, is to get Florence Nightingale to share her truth, and she finally did it. Cuckoo shrieked and pointed at the ring. Annie and Jack both laughed. Annie quickly hid her hand under the blanket. Florence turned back to them. "Did that sound funny?" she said. She seemed embarrassed. "Oh, no," said Annie. She paused. "It sounded true." "Meaning and purpose," Jack repeated. "Do you think that's a secret of greatness?" "Yes, I do," said Florence. "Do you agree?" "Oh, yes, totally," said Jack. "And we know you'll find a way to do it," said Annie. "Trust us." A rooster crowed, then another and another. The first light of dawn crept through the window. "Listen to them all," said Florence. "It's a brand new day." "Yes," agreed Annie. The door to the cabin swung open. Countess von Kinsky stood at the threshold, wrapped in her red shawl, her dark hair falling in curls around her shoulder. "Cuckoo, my baby!" she cried. The baboon screeched, bounded off the bed, and leapt into the Countess's arms. The two of them waltzed around the room, the Countess's long curls swirling through the air. Jack, Annie, and Florence all laughed at the sight. Finally, the Countess put Cuckoo on her shoulder and looked at Jack and Annie. "Oh my," she cried. "What happened to you?" "Cuckoo ran away from jackals," said Florence, "and they rescued her from the top of a cliff." "Oh, my dear children, thank you," said the Countess. Here's a picture of the Countess with her baby baboon monkey. "Cuckoo, you little rascal, causing these nice children to suffer so." "We'll be fine," said Annie. "Miss Nightingale has taken really good care of us." "Well, you are the best baby baboon caretakers in the world," said the Countess. "I would love to stay and admire you all day, but we must hurry away. Our boat is leaving for Cairo. Say goodbye, Cuckoo. Say thank you to your wonderful friends." Cuckoo looked at Jack and Annie. Her dark eyes were soft and grateful. "Oh, woo," she said. "Oh, woo," Annie answered. "Goodbye, Cuckoo van Kinsky," said Jack, waving with his left hand. "Farewell," said the Countess. Then she and the baby baboon headed out the door. Oh, that was a good chapter. They finally got the truth. All right, so we're going to read chapter 10. It's called Goodbye, Thebes. All right, here we go. I'm afraid we should leave too, said Annie. It's almost time for us to meet up with our parents. Oh, yes, of course, said Florence. Where do you need to go? Across the Nile, said Jack, by the sycamore. We'll rendezvous there. Jack put on his shirt, his belt, and his hat. Good, said Florence. No doubt Mustafa and Ali are already sitting by the river waiting to help travelers. We will shout for them to row across and pick you up. Thanks, said Jack. And you will need this, Annie, said Florence. She went to a small closet and took out a wooden crutch. I always travel with a few medical supplies. It's not much, but it should help you a bit. Great, said Annie. She took the crutch from Florence and used it to help herself down from the bed. Jack climbed down too, careful not to jostle his right arm. As they followed Florence out of her cabin, dawn was spreading its rosy glow across the Temple of Luxor, the anchored sailboats, and the waters of the Nile. Charles and Selina were already on the deck. Selina was sketching the temple, while Charles sat in a desk chair reading a book. Good morning, they both exclaimed when they saw Jack, Annie, and Florence. Say good morning and goodbye to our new friends, said Florence. Jack and Annie are leaving Thebes soon. Oh, dear, we will miss these brave American children, said Selina. She put down her sketching tools and rushed over to give Jack and Annie careful hugs. Good luck with your injuries, my dears. Thanks, said Jack. Thanks for helping us, said Annie. Goodbye, old chap, said Charles, shaking Jack's left hand. And young lady, I'm sure you'll be leaping over barrels soon. Right-o, said Annie. Donkeys brayed across the river. Look, said Jack, pointing to Mustafa and Ali on the western bank. They're already up and ready for work, said Charles. The Englishman stepped across the boat deck, faced the Nile, and shouted, Mustafa! He waved for the guide to come across the river. Mustafa climbed into his rowboat, pushed off the bank, and started rowing across. Come, said Florence. I'll accompany you to the water's edge. Thanks again, said Annie, waving goodbye to Charles and Selina. Charles tipped his hat as Selina waved back. Then Jack and Annie followed Florence down the landing. In the glowing dawn light, a heron was standing on one leg in the water. He looks like me, said Annie, hopping on one foot. Florence smiled. There is more activity here in the first hour of cool morning than at any other time of the day, she said. Men in robes and turbans were sitting under a palm tree, smoking a water pipe. 2 women were bathing small children in the Nile. Some girls were spreading wet clothes over rocks to dry. All right. Having to hold my phone and read at the same time. It's kind of funny. All right, so here's what's going on around the Nile. There's Florence Nightingale saying goodbye to Jack and Annie. There's the moms washing their kids. There's Mustafa and Ali. All right. Jack heard someone shouting. He and Annie and Florence turned to look back at the sailboats anchored offshore. Lord and Lady Bickerson were on the deck of one of the boats. They were swatting and yelling at the flies. Poor souls, breathed Florence. The flies? Asked Annie. Florence laughed. I like you both very much, she said. I think we could be good friends. I think so too, said Annie. Me too, Jack added. His whole opinion of Florence had changed since she had tended to their injuries so kindly, and he had heard her speak about her dreams. Ah, here's your carriage, said Florence. Mustafa had arrived in his rowboat. He pulled it ashore, then he and Florence helped Annie and Jack climb aboard and take their seats. Goodbye, Jack and Annie, Florence said, standing on the river bank. You must visit me if you ever come to England. Jack was sad to leave her, and even sadder to think that they would probably never see her again. Good luck with everything, he said. Hold on to your dreams. We'll miss you, said Annie. Florence smiled her most radiant smile and waved. Then she turned and walked away. Mustafa used his oars to push off, then began rowing back across the river Nile. Geese flew overhead. A pelican was perched on the crocodile's rock. The old Egyptian sang his song. The words were still impossible to understand, but Jack felt he knew what they meant now. They celebrated the Nile and all the life around it, ancient and new, beasts and birds. When they came to the other side of the river, Mustafa pulled the rowboat up onto the bank, then helped Jack and Annie climb out. Nearby, Ali was talking to some travelers who wanted donkeys. He called to his grandfather. "Wait, please," said Jack. He fumbled in his pouch for their Egyptian money. He pulled out their coins and offered them to Mustafa. "These are all for you, please. You helped us a lot. You saved us, actually." The guide shook his head. "No," he said. It was the first word Jack had heard him speak. "I helped you not for money, but because you needed help. It would be wrong for me to accept payment for a simple good deed." "Oh, yes, I understand," said Jack. He put away his coins. "Thank you very much." "Yes, thank you very much," said Annie. "And please tell Ali goodbye from us." The old man nodded, silent again, and headed toward his grandson and the new travelers. Day after day, Mustafa and Ali helped people, Jack thought, and always with gentleness and dignity. "Come on, let's go quick," Annie said, "while no one's looking." "Righto," said Jack. Using her crutch, Annie hobbled to the sycamore tree. Jack followed her. When they slipped under the canopy of spreading branches, Annie grabbed the rope ladder. "Oh, man, can you climb up with your sprained ankle?" Jack asked her. "No big deal," she said. "But what about you, with your hurt shoulder and arm?" "No big deal," said Jack. Annie propped her crutch against the tree trunk. Then she grabbed the sides of the ladder and stepped with her good foot onto the bottom rung. Moving slowly and carefully, she started up to the top. "Ow, ow, ow," she said under her breath as she climbed. Jack watched as Annie pulled herself inside the treehouse. Then he grabbed a rung of the ladder with his left hand. "At least the sycamore tree isn't as tall as the oak tree in Frog Creek," he thought. Keeping his right arm still, he slowly pulled himself up, teetering this way and that on the rope ladder. Finally, he painfully heaved himself into the treehouse too. He was exhausted. He had no idea how they were going to climb back down. "Ready to go?" "Ready to go?" Annie asked. She had already opened the Pennsylvania book to the picture of the Frog Creek. Jack sighed. "Yeah, but I don't know how we're going to explain your ankle and my shoulder to Mom and Dad." "We'll solve that problem when we get home," said Annie. She pointed at the picture. "I wish we could go there. Goodbye, Thebes." The wind started to blow. The treehouse started to spin. It spun faster and faster. Then everything was still. Absolutely still. Jack's arm sling was gone. He moved his shoulder carefully. The pain was gone too. He breathed a huge sigh of relief. He was happy to be wearing his own clothes again, and even happier that his arms and shoulder were perfectly fine. "No more bandage," said Annie. "No more sprained ankle." Jack and Annie looked at each other in wonder. "Cool," they said together. "I guess what happens in Thebes stays in Thebes," said Jack. Annie laughed. "Okay, we have the third secret of greatness now," said Jack. He took out his pencil and picked up the piece of paper from the floor. Under the words humility and hard work, he added meaning and purpose. "Isn't that two secrets?" said Annie. "No, in this case, I think it takes two words to say one thing, really," said Jack. "I'm glad to know Florence's life will have meaning and purpose," said Annie. "I didn't want to tell her friends this and freak her out, but she'll go to nursing school in Germany, and then she'll be a great nurse in the Crimea, and eventually she'll be the founder of modern nursing." "Whew," said Jack. "Yeah, whew," said Annie. "And you know who else I think had meaning and purpose in his life?" said Jack. "Who?" said Annie. "Mustafa," said Jack. "He worked so hard, but he wouldn't take money for doing the right thing, and I could tell he really loved his grandson." "That's true," said Annie. "Mustafa's life definitely had meaning and purpose." "I'll bet Ali grows up to be just like him," said Jack. He took the tiny bottle of mist from his pack and put it on the paper. Then he looked at Annie. "Your ring, my lady." Ooh, I forgot, she said. She pulled the ring of truth off her finger and put it on the paper next to the bottle. Okay, let's go home, said Jack. I'm ready, said Annie. She led the way down the ladder. Jack followed. Wow, he said. This ladder is a lot easier without a hurt shoulder and a sprained ankle, isn't it? No kidding, said Annie. Jack and Annie started walking together through the Frog Creek woods. Hey, do you think our lives have meaning and purpose? Said Annie. I guess so, said Jack. We help people. And animals, said Annie. Horses, pandas, penguins, polar bears, dogs, elephants, kangaroos, koalas, baby baboons. I'll tell you one thing, Jack interrupted. Right now, my life has only one purpose. What's that? Asked Annie. To go home, sit on the front porch, and read my book, take notes, and drink lemonade, said Jack. Home, sweet home, said Annie. Home, sweet home, repeated Jack. And he and Annie hurried home through the summery, good-smelling, bird-singing, shadowy Frog Creek woods. The end. That was such a good ending. I love the way that ended. All right, so just looking at the end of the book, remember, there's even more information from the author, from Mary Pope Osborne. She tells real live detailed information about Florence Nightingale. There's just about a page worth of information. And it's really neat to learn more about that. And also, don't forget, there's also, a fact tracker that you could read that tells you more about that book. All right, well, I loved the truth of finding your purpose and your meaning and purpose. You know, sometimes as a kid, I remember some of my students thinking that they would get to that when they're older. You know, when I'm older, I'll find the meaning and the purpose that I have in being born and even being here in this world. But I have seen my 7 and 8-year-old bullfrogs that I teach, and some of y'all are sitting here right now reading with me. I've seen y'all do amazing things. Even as a 7 and 8-year-old, you've helped raise money. You've made a difference at your home, with your friends, with your family. You've made a difference in the world. In our community, you've made a difference. So don't think that you have to be an adult to start making a difference and having meaning for your life. Yes, you'll do different things as an adult, more than likely, and even as a teenager, but it's never, ever too early to start making a difference and having a purpose for your life. And so I just want to encourage you to take the words that we learned from Florence Nightingale. She really did say that. That's really, truly, in real life, what she believed, and she lived that. And that's why we're reading a book about her now in 2018, about the difference she made, and that she just wanted to be purposeful in her job and in helping people, and that gave her meaning. That gave her joy. And so I hope that you've learned an awesome lesson through this book, just like I have. All right, so I'm going to show you real quick. So Monday, we're going to take a break from the chapter book and have a picture book. It's a wonderful surprise. My mom read a really neat picture book, and so that will be on Monday. We're going to take the weekend off. So on Monday, make sure and check in and read an awesome book with me. And then on Tuesday, we're going to start our next newest chapter book. Now, nobody ever commented, so I just went ahead and chose the book that I felt like should go next. Now, so we just read number 51, right? And so I thought, why not? I actually haven't read this next book. It's number 52, and it's called Soccer on Saturday. And so I know boys and girls both love to play soccer. So maybe, hopefully, this will be a interesting book for you to read with us. So I'm going to give you about 3 days to get this. Either check it out from the library, or you can go buy it if your parents want to. But Soccer on Sunday is our next book. It's, again, Magic Treehouse book number 52, and it's Mary Pope Osborne is the author. So I hope you're enjoying your summer still, and I hope that reading is helping your brain not turn into that summer slush that sometimes can happen when you're not engaging your brain. So I will see you on Monday with an awesome picture book. And then Tuesday, we will start our next book, Soccer on Sunday. All right? I'll talk to you soon. Bye, guys.